I never thought I'd be standing at my daughter's gallery, opening, champagne in hand, watching her life unravel in real time. But when Sarah squeezed my arm during her speech and slipped a folded cocktail napkin into my jacket pocket, my blood ran cold. The napkin read, "Dad, his real name isn't Jonathan. Please help me." My daughter was 29, brilliant, and had just opened her first art gallery in downtown Seattle. The place was packed with collectors, critics, and society types who'd paid $500 a plate to be here. And there she was, on stage, radiant in a cream silk dress, holding hands with Jonathan Pierce, venture capitalist, art patron, and apparently a complete fraud. I'd met Jonathan 3 months ago when Sarah brought him to Sunday dinner. He was 38, impeccably dressed, spoke 4 languages, and had a portfolio that included stakes in tech startups from San Francisco to Singapore. He'd made a big show of loving my late wife's paintings that still hung in our living room, even offered to introduce Sarah to museum curators in New York. My daughter was glowing. She'd been single for 2 years after a rough breakup, and here was this Renaissance man who seemed designed specifically for her. But that napkin in my pocket was burning a hole through my chest. I waited until Sarah finished her speech, until the crowd dispersed to admire the paintings, until Jonathan was surrounded by investors near the bar. Then, I caught my daughter's eye and tilted my head toward the back office. She understood immediately. "Dad, I'm so sorry to drag you into this," she whispered, the moment the door closed. Her hands were shaking. I didn't know who else to tell. Start from the beginning. Last week, Jonathan left his laptop open at my apartment. I wasn't snooping, I swear. But an email notification popped up. It was from someone named Marcus, and the preview said, "Phoenix operation on schedule." I clicked it without thinking. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots. "Dad, his real name is Marcus Webb. Jonathan Pierce doesn't exist." My training from 35 years with the Seattle Police Department kicked in immediately. I'd retired as a detective 5 years ago, but you don't lose those instincts. I scrolled through the screenshots. Encrypted messages about asset acquisition, references to a woman named Victoria, timeline projections showing something called Phase 3 scheduled for next month. "There's more," Sarah said. I found a folder on his desktop labeled SP. She pulled up more screenshots. "It's me, Dad. Files on my education, my finances, your finances, the gallery purchase, everything. There's even a document called Inheritance Projection." The room tilted slightly. How much does he know about the trust? Everything, apparently. He knows about Mom's life insurance, your pension, the property in Oregon. There's a spreadsheet estimating total assets at $3.2 million. I'd spent 3 decades putting criminals away. I knew a long con when I saw one, but this wasn't just any mark. This was my daughter, my only child, and some parasite had spent 3 months studying her like a thesis project. Has he proposed? Not yet, but he's been hinting. He wants me to add him to the gallery's business account to help with cash flow. He offered to invest $200,000, but said it would be easier if we combined finances first. Her voice cracked. I almost said yes, Dad. I almost trusted him completely. I pulled her into a hug. She was crying now, quiet tears of betrayal and embarrassment. Over her shoulder, I could see through the office window to the gallery floor where Jonathan was laughing with a couple who'd just purchased a $40,000 sculpture. He had no idea his world was about to collapse. "Listen to me," I said, holding Sarah's shoulders. "We're going to handle this, but you can't let him know you're suspicious. Can you do that?" She wiped her eyes and nodded. "What are we going to do?" "First, I need you to act normal tonight. Smile, play the happy couple. Tomorrow morning, forward me everything you found. Then I'm going to call in some favors." My daughter straightened her dress and checked her makeup in a small mirror. "I feel so stupid." "Don't. These people are professionals. They study psychology. They know how to manipulate. The fact that you caught on this early means you're smarter than he expected." We walked back out to the gallery. Jonathan immediately appeared at Sarah's side, sliding an arm around her waist. Up close, I studied him with fresh eyes. The expensive watch, the perfect hair, the practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was good. 3 months ago, I'd liked him. Now I wanted to arrest him on the spot. "Richard, fantastic event," he said, shaking my hand. "Sarah's talent is finally getting the recognition it deserves." "She's worked hard for this," I replied, matching his firm grip. "We're very proud. I hope you'll let me take you both to dinner next week." "There's something I'd like to discuss." He squeezed Sarah's hand meaningfully. My daughter's smile didn't waver. "That sounds wonderful." I watched them mingle with guests for another hour, Jonathan's hand never leaving the small of Sarah's back, marking his territory. Possessive, controlling. I'd seen it 1,000 times in domestic cases. The warning signs were all there, but they'd been wrapped in expensive cologne and venture capital success stories. At midnight, I drove home to the house I'd shared with my wife for 30 years. Margaret had died of cancer 3 years ago, and some nights the silence still hurt. But tonight, the quiet was useful. I needed to think. I pulled out the napkin Sarah had slipped me and read it again under the kitchen light. Her handwriting was shaky, urgent. She'd taken a huge risk passing that note in a room full of people. If Jonathan had seen it, he might have accelerated whatever timeline he was running. The next morning, Sarah's email arrived at 6 a.m. Dozens of screenshots, file directories, even screen recordings of her scrolling through his computer. My daughter had been thorough. I opened my laptop and got to work. First call was to Tony Chen, an old partner who'd moved to the FBI's white-collar crime division. "Tony, I need a background check run. Off the books. The target is using the name Jonathan Pierce, but I have reason to believe it's an alias." "Richard, you know I can't just—" "Tony, it's my daughter. Please." There was a long pause. "Send me what you have. I'll see what I can do." Second call was to Patricia Oakes, a private investigator I'd worked with on cold cases. "Patricia, I need full surveillance. Target is Marcus Webb, possibly using the alias Jonathan Pierce. I need to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, everything. Daily rate is $800 plus expenses." "Done. Start today." Third call was to James Morrison, who ran a forensic accounting firm downtown. "James, I'm sending you financial documents. I need you to trace everything, money movement, shell companies, the works." By noon, I had a team assembled. By evening, the first reports started coming in. Tony called back first. "Richard, your instincts were right. Marcus Webb, 39, originally from Phoenix. He's got a record fraud, identity theft, forgery, did 3 years in Arizona, released 4 years ago. Since then, he's been operating under at least 4 different identities. Jonathan Pierce is his latest. What's his pattern? Targets women with assets, typically 25 to 35, educated, successful. He romances them, gains access to finances, then disappears with whatever he can grab. We think he's hit at least 7 women in the past 3 years, average take of $400,000 per victim." My hands clenched into fists. Why isn't he in prison? Most victims don't report it. They're embarrassed. Or he structures it so it looks like legitimate business dealings. We've been watching him, but we need evidence of active fraud to move. You're about to get it. Patricia's surveillance photos arrived that night. Marcus entering a luxury apartment building in Bellevue, not the address he'd given Sarah. Marcus meeting with a woman in her early 30s at a coffee shop, holding hands across the table. Marcus at a jewelry store, looking at engagement rings. I called Sarah. He's running multiple cons simultaneously. There's at least one other woman, maybe more. Oh God. Her voice was small. He told me I was the one, that he'd never felt this way before. I know, sweetheart. But listen, this is good news. It means we can prove pattern behavior. How much access does he have to your accounts right now? None. I haven't added him to anything yet. Keep it that way? Has he been pressuring you? He mentioned it again yesterday. Said if we're planning a future together, we need to streamline our finances. He's also been asking about your health, Dad. Whether you have a good doctor, if you've updated your will recently. There it was, the endgame. Romance the daughter, isolate her from family, wait for the elderly father to die or become incapacitated, then seize control of the combined assets. I'd seen it before, but never this close to home. James called with the financial analysis. Richard, this guy is sophisticated. He's got money flowing through 7 different LLCs, routing payments to make it look like legitimate investment income. But when you trace it back, it's all recycled fraud proceeds. He's not a venture capitalist, he's a con artist who plays one on LinkedIn. Can you document all of this? Already done. I've prepared a full report that would hold up in court. Over the next week, we built an airtight case. Patricia's surveillance showed Marcus I refused to call him Jonathan anymore, meeting with 3 different women, telling each of them she was special. Tony's FBI contacts identified 2 more victims willing to testify. James traced every dollar back to its fraudulent source. But I wanted more than just an arrest. I wanted to destroy him the way he'd tried to destroy my daughter. Sarah called me on Thursday afternoon. "Dad," he proposed, "just now, at the gallery." He had photographers there and everything. He posted it on social media before I could even answer. "What did you say?" I said yes. "You told me to act normal, right?" "You did perfect, sweetheart. Now here's what we're going to do." The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday night at the Columbia Tower Club, one of Seattle's most exclusive venues. Marcus had insisted on paying, had invited 200 guests, had even hired a videographer. He wanted this documented, wanted the social proof of their relationship locked in place. It would make it harder for Sarah to back out later, harder for her to claim coercion when he started moving money around. He had no idea we were documenting him right back. I arrived early and found Tony waiting in the lobby. He was in a suit, looking like any other guest. "We've got 6 agents positioned throughout the venue. Soon as you give the signal, we move. He needs to confess first. I want him to admit it in front of everyone." "Richard, that's not..." "Trust me." The party started at 7 p.m. The venue was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Marcus had spared no expense, probably because he expected to steal it all back soon anyway. Sarah looked beautiful in a pale blue dress, but I could see the tension in her shoulders as Marcus paraded her around the room. He was in his element, shaking hands with tech investors and gallery donors, playing the role of successful entrepreneur in love. At 8 p.m., Marcus called for everyone's attention. He stood at the front of the room with Sarah, champagne glass raised. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our engagement. Sarah has brought so much joy into my life these past few months. I can't wait to build a future together." The crowd applauded. Sarah smiled, but her eyes found mine across the room. I nodded slightly. "Time to move." "Before we toast," I said, standing up, "I'd like to share something. A father's perspective on his daughter's engagement." Marcus's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He hadn't expected this. I walked to the front of the room, pulling a folder from my jacket. When my daughter first introduced me to Jonathan, I was thrilled. He seemed perfect, successful, charming, cultured. Everything a father hopes for. I opened the folder. But then I did what any retired police detective would do. I ran a background check. The room went silent. Marcus's face drained of color. "Imagine my surprise," I continued, "when I discovered that Jonathan Pierce doesn't exist. No birth certificate, no high school records, no college transcripts, nothing before 4 years ago." I pulled out a photo. But Marcus Webb does exist. Marcus Webb from Phoenix, Arizona. Convicted fraudster. Identity thief. Guests began pulling out phones, searching the name. Marcus took a step back, but Tony and 2 agents were already blocking the exits. You see, Marcus here has been running what's called a romance scam. He targets successful young women, studies their finances, proposes marriage, gains access to their money, and disappears. He's done it at least 7 times in 3 years. I pulled out more documents. "Patricia Oakes, the private investigator I hired, has been following you for 2 weeks. Would you like to explain who Victoria is? Or Madison? Or the engagement ring you purchased on Tuesday for a 3rd woman?" The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Sarah covered her mouth, playing her part perfectly the shocked fiancé betrayed. Marcus's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "Here's my favorite part," I said, pulling out James's financial report. Jonathan Pierce, venture capitalist. Except you don't have any investments, do you, Marcus? Every dollar in your accounts can be traced back to previous fraud victims. You're not an investor. You're just a thief with a good tailor. This is insane, Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaking. Richard, I don't know what you think you found, but FBI, Tony announced, pulling out his badge. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. 2 agents moved in with handcuffs. The room watched in stunned silence as Marcus's carefully constructed persona shattered. As they read him his rights, he made one last attempt to reach Sarah. Baby, please. This is a misunderstanding. Tell them. My name, Sarah said coldly, is not Baby, and the only misunderstanding was thinking you could fool my father. They led him away. The moment he was out of sight, Sarah collapsed into my arms, her whole body shaking with relief and delayed terror. Around us, guests were buzzing with shock. Phones out, already spreading the story across social media. By tomorrow, Marcus Webb's face would be everywhere, making it impossible for him to run this con again. You okay? I whispered into my daughter's hair. I am now. Tony approached us as the crowd dispersed. We've got him cold. With your evidence plus testimony from his other victims, he's looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. Good, Sarah said. What about the women he already scammed? We're working on asset recovery. Won't get everything back, but it's something. Over the next few days, the story exploded. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. Gallery owner and retired detective, father exposed serial con artist at engagement party. Marcus Webb's mugshot was everywhere. 3 more victims came forward. The FBI expanded their investigation and found evidence of 9 additional cons across 4 states. Sarah closed the gallery for a week to process everything. We spent that time together, not talking much, just being in each other's presence. She cried sometimes, angry at herself for falling for the manipulation. I reminded her that the smartest people get conned. That's why con artists target them. How did you know? She asked one evening over takeout at my kitchen table. What made you suspicious before I even gave you the napkin? Honestly, I didn't know anything for certain. But there was something about the way he looked at you. It wasn't love, it was appraisal. Like you were an investment, not a person. And when you passed me that note, it confirmed what my gut was already telling me. I kept thinking I was paranoid. He was so convincing. That's the skill. These people study their targets. Learn what you want to hear. Become that person. It's not your fault you believed him. She picked at her noodles. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. You will. It'll take time, but you will. The right person won't study you like a target. They'll know you because they care enough to listen, not because they're planning to rob you. 2 weeks later, Sarah reopened the gallery. The publicity from the con artist exposure had paradoxically boosted her profile. Articles about her art appeared alongside stories about the takedown. Sales increased. She hired security, implemented better financial controls, and started attending a support group for fraud victims. I went back to my quiet retirement, but now Sunday dinners were weekly instead of monthly. Sarah needed the routine, the reminder that family was real, even when romance proved false. We'd cook together, swap stories about our week, sometimes mention Marcus's trial preparations, but mostly just enjoy being father and daughter without any predators circling. 3 months after the engagement party disaster, Sarah came to dinner with a smile I hadn't seen in a while. I met someone, she said carefully. His name is David. He's an architect. We've been on 2 dates. My instincts immediately kicked in. How did you meet? At a community center. He was volunteering, teaching kids how to build model structures. I was there donating some old supplies from the gallery. What does he do? Residential design, mostly. He owns a small firm with 2 partners. He drives a 10-year-old Subaru and lives in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill because he's saving up to buy land and build his own house. I nodded slowly. That's a good sign, someone with long-term goals that don't involve other people's money. Dad, I know you're going to run a background check. Already did, while you were in the bathroom. She laughed, and it was genuine. And he's clean. Born in Seattle, Went to University of Washington. No criminal record. Pays his taxes on time. His credit score is 780, which suggests good financial management. He's been at the same firm for 8 years, which indicates stability and loyalty. You got all that in 15 minutes? I made some calls before you arrived. Sarah shook her head, but she was smiling. I don't know whether to be annoyed or grateful. Be grateful. I'm not going to relax until I know you're safe. I know, Dad. And honestly, after everything with Marcus, it feels good to know someone's watching out for me. We finished dinner and cleaned up together. Through the kitchen window, I could see Margaret's rose garden, now maintained by a service but still blooming the way she'd designed it. She would have handled this situation better than I did, with more grace, more emotional intelligence. But I'd done what I could with the tools I had. Investigation, documentation, and the fierce protective instinct that never goes away, no matter how old your children get. Before Sarah left that night, she hugged me tightly in the doorway. Thank you for believing me, for not saying I was paranoid or overreacting. You're my daughter. When you say you're in trouble, I listen. I know a lot of people whose parents wouldn't have. Then they're lucky they're not my kids. She laughed and climbed into her car. I watched her drive away, waiting until her taillights disappeared around the corner before going back inside. The house was quiet again, but it felt different now, less empty. Sarah and I had always been close, but surviving Marcus Webb together had reinforced something important. Family isn't just blood, it's showing up when someone needs help, believing them when they're scared, and having the skills and determination to actually do something about it. I poured myself a glass of the bourbon Margaret used to like, and sat in my chair by the window. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Webb was in prison awaiting trial, his carefully constructed fake identity dismantled, his con exposed. 7 women were getting some measure of justice. My daughter was safe and rebuilding her life. People think that getting older means becoming helpless, irrelevant, easy to dismiss. Marcus Webb certainly thought that. He'd factored an elderly father into his con. Probably saw me as an obstacle to be managed with charm and patience, until I died and Sarah inherited everything. He hadn't counted on the fact that age brings experience, that a 35-year career in law enforcement teaches you things about human nature that don't fade with retirement, that a father's instinct to protect his child doesn't diminish just because she's grown. The glass of bourbon caught the lamplight, amber and warm. I raised it slightly toward Margaret's portrait on the wall. We did good, didn't we? Our girl is going to be fine. In my imagination, she smiled back. Yeah, Richard, we did good. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Thank you again. Love you, Dad. I typed back. Love you too, kiddo. Always. Outside, Seattle's lights sparkled against the dark water of Puget Sound. Tomorrow, I'd probably run another background check on this David character. Maybe follow him for a day or two, just to be sure. Sarah would roll her eyes if she knew, but she'd also understand. Because that's what fathers do. We watch, we wait, we protect. And when danger comes dressed in expensive suits and fake credentials, we're ready. Marcus Webb learned that lesson the hard way. I hoped it was one he'd remember for the next 10 to 15 years behind bars. I finished my bourbon, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The house was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet now, peaceful, not empty. My daughter was safe. That was all that mattered.